Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be in the world. Welcome to Thoughtful Nuggets and Pearls on Gift of Healing TV. I'm Sara Jane, and I am delighted to welcome back to the program David McLeod. David, thank you so much for joining me.
Yes, good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Sara, it's great to see you again. It's always fun to have a chat with you, and I'm looking forward to whatever we create today.
Oh, and we're going to be talking about open heart, open mind. And these programs we've really created these to give people food for thought. And so we may come at things from slightly different perspectives, but it's about helping people, I suppose, to open their heart and their mind to, are there other ways of thinking about things? And there's no right and wrong. Which is something we were just saying before we went live. So, open heart, open mind. To just start with, why are we so afraid to show who we are? Why are we afraid to say, oh, I like the thought of doing that, I'm going to do it? Why do we hold ourselves back? Are we afraid of what others think, others might say? And there could potentially be other things that hold you back. But why do we do this? Why do we close ourselves off to the things that speak to us most? David.
Well, that's a very, very deep question to get us started, that's for sure. And I know that there are as many answers as there are people on the planet. But I think probably in general terms, one of the things that I've noticed for myself, what tends to hold me back, is some story I have in my head that if I say this, or if I do this, or if I show up in this way, you or somebody else won't like me. You will find fault with me. You will see the things that maybe I don't want you to see. So we have this belief that other people are constantly judging us. And what's interesting about that, I think, I've done a lot of personal growth work on this, and I realize I don't spend all that much time judging other people. I do spend a lot of time judging myself. And sometimes when I see a certain aspect of myself that I don't like so much, and I don't want to show it, I end up seeing that same attribute or quality showing up on other people. And so I project it out there and say, oh yeah, you have that quality that I don't like so much. This is a kind of I think it's an ego defense mechanism that we have, that our ego mind puts in place in order to create the illusion of keeping us safe. So I guess the short answer to why we hold ourselves back is to avoid getting hurt and thereby keep ourselves safe. That would be my short form answer.
But going back to that judgment of others, judgment of self, I suppose because I went through so many years of being a people pleaser, I was worried about other people's judgment of me.
Right.
I wasn't judging, well, maybe I was judging them, but in a backwards sort of way.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was, what are they going to think of me if I do that?
Right.
So I was putting a judgment in their thoughts that probably wasn't anywhere near their thoughts.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? And that's all part of projection. You know, one of the things that I teach, and I share this widely, I believe everything is projection. Not everybody agrees with that statement. Some people believe that there's this idea of objective reality, that there isn't a reality outside of myself that is existing as well. And therefore, things can happen out there that have nothing to do with me. And that's one perspective. In my practice, however, I have come to learn and come to realize that really everything in this world, everything in my whole life experience is about me. It really isn't about anybody else. And so consequently, I do project my experiences onto other people. And therefore, because I know the kind of thoughts that I have, I imagine that they have those kinds of thoughts too. And that may or may not be true. It could be wrong. But here's another aspect to the whole projection idea, and that is, if you could just imagine for a moment that you are the only consciousness anywhere in the universe, that you happen to look out and in your mind's eye, you see people doing things. You don't know what they're actually doing. But in your mind, because this whole transaction, this whole experience is happening inside your brain and inside your consciousness, you say, you could close your eyes and still have exactly the same situation. You could completely imagine it and still have exactly the same experience. But because we have eyes and we have ears and we have fingers for touch and we have taste buds and the power of smell, because we have all those inputs coming in, we assume that the source of the input is out there. And so we project the experience out there, even though it could all be happening internally and could be 100% in our imaginations. Now, this is a hard concept for people to grasp. And it does take a little bit of, mental gymnastics to kind of work your mind around it. But it is, again, just another possible perspective in life, neither true nor false. As you said, it's neither right nor wrong. It's just another way of looking at things. And what I found very helpful in my life is if I treat it as everything that I experience in my life is my projection, then I can take responsibility for it. I can become more compassionate and forgiving of myself when I understand that it is me doing all the thinking, doing all the projecting, doing all the imagining. And it's a powerful way of healing too, actually. So.
And I think it's a matter of thinking, okay, it's my perspective of what is happening from my upbringing, everything I have experienced up to this point in my life.
Right.
And so sort of somebody who's experienced things very differently. And I suppose one of the things when I'm working with people, and please don't get me wrong, I do not condone anyone that harms anyone else, mentally, physically, emotionally. I really don't. I really don't condone that. But if you're someone who's been brought up witnessing verbal abuse, physical abuse, and of somebody else or of yourself, that's your norm.
Correct.
You don't know any different because that is the experience of your life.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that for the majority of us, that is totally wrong. And as I said, I don't condone it.
Right.
But you're going to go into, then as you grow up, you're going to go into your adult life thinking that's either what it's going to happen to you, as if you've watched your mother or your father or whatever, or a sibling have something happen to them. That's going to happen in your life, and you draw it to you. So exactly what you were saying, from maybe from a different perspective, but you draw it to you. How many people who've been raised in abusive families end up in abusive relationships? And but how did I end up here?
Right.
Because that's what people draw to them, because that's the experience they're expecting from life.
Right. I think you've hit on a very important point here, and that is when we're born, we first come into this world like an open book. We have no writing anywhere on us. We're perfectly clean, we're innocent, we're pure. And but from the moment we come into the earth, into this physical world, I shouldn't say the earth, but into the physical world, we are immediately under the influence of belief systems of all the people around us. And whatever belief systems they have are really kind of injected in a way into us. We are told, this is what we believe. This is what you will believe. And because you believe that, you will obey and you will do these things and you will so forth. So we come into this world understanding from a spiritual perspective that we are sovereign beings of high integrity. And immediately we are told something the exact opposite. Wait a minute, I'm your boss. I'm in charge of you. I'm your dad. I'm your mom. And you will do what I tell you. We learn about authority very, very early in our lives. And so when we are asked to think for ourselves, we immediately have a red flag that goes up. It says, oh, wait a minute. I've just been told that I'm supposed to believe this. All my life, I've been told I'm supposed to say this kind of thing or do this, behave this certain way or whatever. And now you're asking me what I think? Well, of course, I'm going to tell you what you want to hear because I don't want to get beaten about the head and ears. So you're exactly right. This is something that we learn from a very young age. And parents don't even have to be abusive. No. I mean, not in a traditional sense, but simply a parent trying to tell a kid how to behave in the true sense of the word as a form of abuse. Even though we don't call it that. We call it discipline. We call it raising good kids, raising well-behaved kids, raising kids who will obey authority. You see? And that's what we create. And consequently, we have a whole world full of robotic obeyers. Except when they get pissed off, then they do something, they act out of their hatred and their anger rather than trying to come from the place of the open heart and the mind, rather than trying to reclaim their own true sovereignty so that they can stand in the truth. And that is really hard for people to do. It is hard to do that. And so I want to honor everybody who is struggling with that.
And, and it's very difficult to get yourself out of that.
Yep.
As a child. You've got to get to the point where you almost have an element of understanding of what has gone on.
Yeah.
And then you can say to yourself, right, my mind has now been opened. There are alternatives.
Yeah.
And actually, but how many of us have been taught that it is okay to love ourselves, to think about ourselves, to care for ourselves, to consider ourselves, to appreciate ourselves, to trust ourselves, to believe in ourselves? We can come up with loads and loads of lovely positive words. How many of us have been taught to do that, or that it's okay?
Right.
The word selfish comes up time and time again. You have to think of others first.
Correct.
And what we're learning now is that by coming from our own hearts, learning to love ourselves first, to believe and trust in ourselves, in that open-heartedness, that open-mindedness, we can do and bring so much more for those around us, for those whose lives we touch.
Right.
And by loving ourselves, we're no longer in fear, because we're almost taught that you have to behave to be loved. But actually, when you think about a lot of children, you get the children who are really badly behaved. Why? Because they are seeking attention. Because they feel unloved, unnoticed, unwanted. And so they act up or act out, or whatever term you want to use, because it is the only way they get any form of attention.
Right. And here's something else about that. When the average person, upon seeing a child misbehave, probably reacts like this. Oh my God, what's wrong with those parents? Oh my God, why isn't that kid being controlled? And why are we doing that? Because our own conditioning is starting to take over. this is how we were expected to behave as kids. And then when we became parents ourselves, we were supposed to make our kids behave this way. So when we see a child behaving like that, rather than being compassionate for the child, we're angry at the parents for not doing their job. This is a real insidious thing that most of us don't even think about. But you're absolutely right. If I can pause for a moment, if all of us could just simply pause for a moment and do what you just did and say, wow, that poor child is seeking some attention. How can I give this child some attention without feeding into this dysfunctional behavior? How can I do that? And that's a great question to ask, because often that question can be addressed to ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
When I'm feeling angry, there's usually that little boy inside of me that wants some attention, right? So I ask myself, okay, if I can step aside long enough and say, what is it that my little boy is wanting right now? How can I bring some loving attention to him without feeding into his dysfunctional behavior? Well, my answer to that, what has worked for me, is I'll just pause and I say, hey, buddy, what's up? Seems like you're upset about something. You want to tell me about it? And then just go from there and try not to agree or disagree with anything, but simply hear what the angry little boy has to say. And often just listening without trying to do anything to correct the problem, or any of that stuff that parents typically try and do. What happens is, simply by listening and allowing the inner child to be heard, creates this sense, oh my God, this guy actually cares about what I say and what I think. And that automatically causes relaxation. Well, it doesn't cause relaxation, but relaxation comes because the energy of the anger starts to dissipate. It is a powerful, powerful procedure. And all it means is just simply opening your heart a little bit. Open your heart. In the face of anger, try opening your heart. It's not always easy, but it's a great practice.
Oh, there's no way it's easy. And anything worth doing isn't necessarily easy.
Right.
I think there's plenty of quotes around like that, isn't there? We coming down to, wasn't it, something about life? You were never promised it would be easy, just that it'd be worth it or something.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Which is so true. And I think it is time for us to open our minds. Now, we talk about mind ego. It's been our protector. And I know we've had the conversation before about change your mind's role, sort of give it a much happier, more fulfilling role. And when you allow your mind to open up, to listen, and to truly listen, can we listen to what is not being said as much as what is being said? And it is with children that are doing the acting up. For me, it is about, and I don't have kids, thinking that's great, that's all very well. Yes, but I do have 5 nieces and nephews and 8 great nieces and nephews. And I'm sure I'm going to get sections of this, and have had sections of this with all of them. So when a child, but even come to a physical child, you're not just the inner child. And it's okay. Can we try and gently take them on one side and ask them to talk?
Sure, absolutely.
And then I'm just sort of thinking about things I've witnessed, and especially when a new sibling is born. And it can be very difficult for the oldest child.
Right. Yeah.
Because suddenly they've gone from being the only child, and probably very much loved by grandparents, aunts and uncles, and great aunts and uncles. They've been the only one, and then suddenly they've got a sibling, and suddenly they've got a cousin or 2 or 3 or 4, and suddenly they've gone from being the center of attention to younger ones coming in that, of course, then become the center of attention. And it's helping us all is to realize that that child still needs to know they're loved.
Of course. Yep.
We all still need to know we're loved. And so what is going on in our lives? So when you start getting angry, if something angers you, why? As you said, you ask your child, what's going on? But what is going on? Think about. Are you feeling that you're being picked on? Just recently, and I work with people with their inner child, but it's not just about the child, it's about the adult. You know, the younger you is you of, well, for you it's already morning, but we're coming up to afternoon. But it's the younger you of first thing today. The younger you isn't just about a child aspect. And I found myself working with a 36, 37-year-old aspect of me. That was the time of the wake-up call that came. And realizing actually that what that aspect of me felt and experienced had taken me right back to what happened to my little child.
Yeah, that's right.
And that was before my actual healing journey started. So, of course, I didn't understand any of that. And suddenly it was just like, 20 odd years down the line, I'm suddenly thinking, oh, yes, now I can understand, yes, what I was actually experiencing at that time in my late 30s.
Right. Yeah, it's an amazing journey that we all go through. That much is true. And but you talked about this whole open heart, open mind thing. And I think it's important for us to get back to that, because it couldn't be more important than in the time we're in right now. I mean, when you think about, dealing with children, these children do seem to show up a lot on Facebook and Twitter, and there's no actual conversation happening. There's name calling. There's all this other stuff going on. And I'm thinking, whatever happened to people just trying to communicate? Mm-hmm. And it happens even on social media. And it might be easier on social media because you don't actually see the person that you're, I don't know, lashing out at. And so what can we do in that case? Now, there are a few people that I communicate with on my channels that are really, really good at this. They don't agree necessarily with something that I say, but rather than try to paint me as anything with an IST on the end, they ask a question instead. Tell me more about that. How did you come to this way of thinking? Now, those questions I really like, because that tells me they're actually interested in finding out what's at the root of it. And you, I don't know if you mentioned this when we were live or before when we were talking, you mentioned how two people who appear to be on opposite ends of a conversation, and I've had this experience too, you're on polar opposites of a conversation. But if both of you come to that conversation with a desire to open your heart, open your mind, and just listen to understand, then what you discover is that there's a lot of common ground between you, even though whatever it is you started with appear to be opposites. And this is really, really powerful for us to understand. I honestly believe the people who have 180-degree opposite perspective to me want just as much to create a better world, want just as much for people to be happy, want just as much for everyone to have the opportunities. We're all looking for the same thing. We just have different ways of doing it because, as you said, of the way we were brought up, of the filters that we put on as a result of our, our entire life journey, and all that stuff. All of that history has an impact on how we look at things going forward. And so we see things differently. But when we get right down underneath all that stuff and you basically peel off the filters and look at the truth underneath, what we end up with is we're looking at the same thing and we both want the same thing. So it really, really helps to heal the world simply by being willing to, instead of arguing or correct the other person for their dysfunctional belief or whatever, simply ask them, what do you mean by that? Or tell me more. Let me understand a deeper sense of what you're getting at. And how did you come to this belief? And all those great things create connection, which is really what I think we all want. Oh,
absolutely. Yeah. And you've used the word polar opposites. And of course, I was talking about north and south.
Right.
And east and west. But I was also, was I looking at something from the inside, or was I looking at it from the outside? And was the other individual looking at it from the opposite to the way I was? But it's about listening, because I'd shared my thoughts and then they shared theirs. And by listening, I was thinking, although you appear to be saying something almost totally different, I actually am hearing so many similarities.
Exactly.
And so it is about listening with open mind and open heart. Yeah.
And that's what the whole concept of listening to understand is all about. Very often when we listen in order to make you go away. Okay, I heard you, now get the hell out of here and don't bother me anymore. Or we listen just long enough so we can jump in and argue with you, right? A lot of people do that just out of habit, bad listening habits. We didn't really learn, from an early age, how to listen with our heart. By the way, I just realized that you probably have noticed this before, but the word heart has the word ear right in the middle of it.
Yes, I have heard that. Yes.
Yeah. And so if you think about that, if you can listen with your heart, that is really truthful listening. But in order to listen with your heart, you have to first open your heart. And now I'm not sure which comes first, opening the mind or opening the heart. But if you can open your heart, I'm pretty sure opening the mind is pretty easy. Opening the mind first might not lead to an open heart. I don't know. But I'm just saying that open the heart, then the mind will kind of open on its own, and you'll begin to see the other person's perspective in a way that has far less judgment and negative energy associated with it. You can now be more willing to entertain possibilities in your mind that you might not have considered before.
And I think that is the important thing. To me, everybody has to work with the way that works most easily for them, the way that feels right for them. So if opening your heart first is the way that it feels right for you, if encouraging your mind to be more open, but it's that connection of heart-mind. Is it heart to mind? Is it mind to heart? It doesn't matter. When you think about connection of source down through yourself to earth, do you start in earth and up through yourself to source, or do you do it the other way around? Does it really matter? It's what works right, what feels right, and what works for you.
In the moment, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because it might change. Today, you might try the heart opening first and watch the mind open. And then maybe tomorrow you'll try the other thing. Either way, it's about being willing to experiment and see what makes you feel more open and inviting. And we've been talking up to this point, we've been talking about using this for the power of listening. But I think we can also use it just for the power of being and for the power of speaking. If I can open my heart before I speak, then I can soften my words and bring more love into them. That's all of us can learn to do that. And so even if I don't care what other people think about what I'm saying, and I may or may not care, that's up to you, but I can now offer it, say, this is just my perspective. And by the way, this applies in every walk of life, right? It doesn't matter whether you are, a teacher or a software engineer, or if you happen to work in a job where you're mostly by yourself. You can still be in that space of open heart, open mind, no matter what kind of a circumstance you're in.
And I think for me, it's really important. Actually, the more difficult the circumstance, when you can have that open heart, open mind, then you actually make things easier because you're in less judgment. You're less likely to react. But, okay, what is going on here?
Exactly.
Let's drop the box away, open that mind. There's a lovely little quote. I've just realized, don't be afraid of being open-minded. Your brain isn't going to fall out.
That's good. Yeah. Well, and the same could be true about your heart. Don't be afraid about being open-hearted. Your heart's not going to fall out. Yeah.
No.
That's a great little reminder. Yeah.
No, yeah. And so I think when we are that open-hearted, open-minded, and truly listen to understand rather than listen to reply, is I think the saying that's going around, we can get a better sense, and we can ask questions rather than respond out of potential anger, aggression, judgment. We come in with much more positive attitude and aspect to it.
Right.
That can negate so many problems.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, look what's happening in the world right now. And it's mostly happening because of these perceived polarities that we have. You know, whether it's a polarity about race or whether it's a polarity about, where you live or what kind of identity you have. That there's so many kinds of polarities that we have. And yet, really, when you get right down to it and tear away those differences, we're more of the same, way more of the same by orders of magnitude than we are different.
Oh, whether you're raised in the country or the city,
yeah.
Whether you're raised in poverty or wealth, you strip it all back from everybody, and we are exactly the same underneath.
That's right. We are all points of awareness on a infinite continuum of consciousness. That's really what we are. But we're connected always to that consciousness, and therefore each of us is connected to all the other points of consciousness. So even though it seems like we're separate and our ego mind wants to keep us separate, the reality is we are connected, and we are inseparably connected, no matter what we might really think about it in terms of our mind.
And the open heart, open mind helps us all to be true to ourselves and to honor each other in the truth and being true to themselves. We don't have to like what is another person's truth. They don't have to like what is my truth.
Right.
When we live from that place of open heart, open mind, we are honoring ourselves and accepting and honoring others. And when you open up, you give, if you're told to do something, if you're given advice, I know what I'm like, back goes up, not a hope in I'm going to listen. You make a suggestion, give me some food for thought. Just give me something to listen to. Let me choose for myself. I may say yes, I may say no. I may think, I like that bit, but that can go away. But I choose.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's an important thing. I mean, I think the idea of liking something, I mean, that just indicates a preference. That's all it is. I have a preference for this and a non-preference for that thing over there. Doesn't mean either one of them is better than the other. It doesn't mean that one is good and one is bad. It just means I prefer this over here. That's all. Tomorrow I might want to try that thing over there, but right now this is my preference and I'm staying there. And so this is another thing to be aware of. When you're living from the place of open mind, open heart, open mind, you become aware of the changing nature of choice. You also become aware of the changing nature of boundaries. This is something that I've really struggled with, because one of the things I know about boundaries is sometimes I'm not aware of a boundary until I've crossed it. And that usually happens when I'm in an interaction with somebody, that I get a little too close or do something and say, hey, whoa, back off there, dude. You're getting too close to me. Okay, I just found your boundary for today. Now, that doesn't mean that's where your boundary is all the time. Maybe under different circumstances, you would allow me to get closer, but right now, that's where it is. And so this is the whole thing about boundaries. Boundaries are not these rigid cages that lock us in. Boundaries are simply energetic spaces around us that we use to protect ourselves. And when I'm feeling completely open and completely vulnerable, those boundaries are like way out there. Way out there. Well, I shouldn't say they're way out there. They're way in here, because you can get really close to me when I do that. I don't know where the boundary is. The boundary seems to disappear, right? But as it blows up, if I find myself falling into fear or anger or any of those other constrictive emotions, what I find is my boundary starts to get closer and closer, and I'm feeling that shield over me, you know? So it's an energetic shift that happens. Here's another thing I've noticed. When my boundaries are expansive, I find my choices to be more expansive. I feel more liberated to choose something that is really more in alignment with my truth. When I'm feeling constricted and afraid, those choices seem very limited to me. So maybe you've had that experience too.
Oh, the more you allow yourself to experience in life and let go of judgments, your own, others, the more life brings you. It's that gratitude. When you concentrate and are grateful for everything that's in your life, rather than concentrating on the negative in your life, you get more of that. When you go into fear, you start to concentrate on the negative. And guess what? You bring a whole load more of that in there. Then now we're starting to talk about the law of attraction. So,
well, but that's interesting, because we talked about right and wrong and good and bad. By the same token, there really is no positive or negative either. There is what you prefer and what you don't, right? Because what may be positive to you may be negative to me, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So I'm always a little bit leery about labeling anything, because I may be saying something that feels true for me, and you may find, wait a minute, that doesn't really resonate for me. I mean, I'm not saying that I recommend people stay angry or stay fearful, but there may actually be some benefit to experiencing those emotions, right? I mean, if you're afraid, there may be a good reason for it. Maybe there is an impending danger that you need to pay attention to. Or if you're angry, maybe there is something that you need to act on right now. You need to maybe protect someone against having a boundary violation or something like that. So what may seem negative under some circumstances can be quite positive in other circumstances. So I'm very nervous about trying to label them in any way. There are emotions which are more or less pleasant to experience, and there are emotions which are maybe on the opposite side of that spectrum. And I've had them all. I'm sure you've had them all too.
I'm sure everybody has.
Yeah.
But we really have overshot. But fear. I remember a time when I was going to go and be on television on a program called The Weakest Link. I was actually on it here in the UK. And
what was that about? The Weakest Link?
It's a quiz. It's like a quiz program.
Oh, okay.
And I was sort of getting ready in the morning to fly up to Scotland to be on the recording of this program. And I had this feeling in my stomach. And I suddenly thought about the feeling. Now, this was a feeling I'd always thought was fear. Probably going right back to the time when I was a baby in hospital and every time my parents appeared and then left without me. And I started thinking about it and I thought, this isn't fear I'm feeling. This is anticipation. So maybe when a reaction starts to happen, try and step back from it. What is it? Is it what I've always thought it was? Or actually, am I feeling something different? Can this be relabeled?
As so many other things are these days.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. David, thank you so much. It has been a real pleasure. Folks, I hope that you've enjoyed listening to that. And I hope it has given you, I think we've covered an awful lot. We've gone quite deep with this. But
we tend to do that.
We do. But I think it's really good that we do, because I think it is about time conversations were had. And so I love that. It really is. So thank you, folks, for joining us. David, thank you for joining me. And next week, I am going to be joined by a lady called Jen Tiller. And she's going to be sharing some breathing exercises with us and breathing right. So I hope that you will join us for that. In the meantime, David, thank you again so much.
Thank
you.
It's been a real pleasure. Sara Jane, it's always a pleasure. I love talking to you.
And I'm sure we'll talk again soon, probably off air.
Okay.
Anyway, take care, David. See you soon. Thank you, folks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.